Doctor Who Before the Flood. At least, I think that's the name of the episode. I honestly don't care enough to go and recheck the title of the episode, so let's hope it's right and I don't embarrass myself. There will be spoilers in this review, definitely. I don't care enough about this episode not to spoil it for people, so there you go. Now, before we really start off properly, I want to go back and say that in my previous review, I did mention that the Doctor went back in time to try to figure out what was going on at the end of the previous episode and left Clara behind, but I neglected to mention that he did take 2 of the scientists from the installation with him. That's my bad. I apologize. So anyway, this episode starts with the Doctor doing kind of an aside to the audience, telling us about the bootstrap paradox, which is when something happens only because it has already happened. It's one of my favorite paradoxes. And I'm thinking, hey, cool, the Doctor's going to deal with the bootstrap paradox in this episode. Maybe he's going to have to create one or break one in order to prevent himself from actually dying. This episode. It's just disappointing on many, many levels. So we get our description of the bootstrap paradox, and then we see that Clara is able to get in touch with the Doctor using her magic space phone. And it's a pretty cool scene, her talking to the Doctor, describing his ghost to him so that he can learn everything he can about his death and try to prevent anyone else from dying. At least that's what we're thinking at this point. And we learn that the Doctor's ghost is saying something different. He's saying a list of everybody's names who have died, and the next one is O'Donnell, the girl who was a fan of the Doctor, the one who I was so happy he hadn't disappointed in the previous episode by letting her get killed. And as I'm sure you can imagine, the creature that is called the Fisher King has woken up in the past. He is the thing that's in the stasis pod in the future, and he's chasing them around, and they have O'Donnell with them, even though the Doctor has already guessed that she's the next one to die. And granted, he does try to get her to stay on the TARDIS, but only very minimally. And they're running, and they're all together, and then there's this absolutely flabbergastingly questionable scene where we cut to them turning the corner, and suddenly she's like 10 feet behind them, and she's going too slow to catch up, and she has to hide separately. The creature finds her, and she dies. What? It was stupid. It was horribly staged to make it look like she was supposed to get killed, like it was her destiny or something. That's stupid. This is Doctor Who. Destiny doesn't exist in Doctor Who. Seriously, guys, what's going on with your heads? I understand the Doctor thinks he's living in a predetermined past made true by what his ghost is saying. But we'll get to that in a minute. Oh, wow, we will get to that in a minute. Because now the next name on the list is Clara, and the Doctor will bend space and time for Clara, because Clara is the most important thing in the freaking universe. Clara, Clara, Clara. I love Clara. She's a great character. She's especially grown a lot in these last couple seasons. But this is the Doctor. He's someone who does everything he can to save everyone. Why is she so much more important? I get that she's his friend, but we'll get to it. We'll get to this in a minute. Just take a calming breath. So anyway, the Doctor goes to confront the creature, and this is where we get the line that was so prominently included in all the trailers. This is where your story ends. And I thought that line was probably going to be used on a long-time Doctor Who villain, one that we've seen a bunch of times and has had a huge impact on the series. But here we have this creature, this new creature, the Fisher King. Had a great design, by the way, that the Doctor confronts, and then he tricks it into going out and getting caught in the flooding that fills the lake and dies. He dies out of nowhere with no explanation as to where exactly he came from, how he was turning people into ghosts, what he planned to do with the planet. We knew he wanted to invade it, but why? We don't know if he knew who the Doctor was, and that's why he was taking all of these extreme actions. We don't know anything about him, except that he had a really cool design. It was completely wasted. Completely wasted on a one-time monster. It was so disappointing. It was such a letdown. Because their confrontation wasn't that exciting, it wasn't that epic, it wasn't that special. There wasn't really anything of substance to it. And then we get the ultimate sin. The stasis pod in the future on the underwater installation opens, and instead of the Fisher King being there, it's the Doctor. That's how he got back to the present. And we find out that his ghost wasn't really a ghost. It was projecting from the stasis pod. He created it to tell himself all these things so that he could do them in the past. And this is where it gets awful. He had already figured that out. O'Donnell died specifically so that he could prove that his ghost was just a hologram giving him information. He let her die to prove a point. I don't know what to say to this. I don't. This isn't the Doctor. And the worst part is, I don't even think the writers really saw it. They bring it up very briefly in the episode, but it's never touched on again. It feels like someone threw the acknowledgement of this in as an afterthought because they knew that the audience was going to react to it and wanted to lampshade that. This isn't part of the Doctor's story arc of him struggling with becoming a better person because it's never mentioned again. It just happens. And that's what this entire episode felt like. It felt like a Doctor Who paint by numbers where things just happen because they're supposed to happen. You have time travel. You have the looming threat. You have the people dying. You have the epic confrontation with the creature. You have the clever resolution. It just felt so conventional that it felt below conventional. This episode was the absolute example of a below average Doctor Who episode, made below average because it felt so lazy. It felt like someone going through the motions. I haven't really talked a lot about my rating scale here, but I am going to talk about it a little bit today. On my rating scale, I rate from 1 to 10. A 3 out of 10 is something that is not entirely terrible, but is something that I will never be dealing with again. That's this episode. But guys, if you've seen this episode, what did you think of it? I'm not going to think of anything more clever than that for my outro because I don't really care. Let's get a discussion going in the comments section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.